With the current government shutdown becoming the second longest in history, Donald Trump has now presided over the two longest shutdowns in history. The longest one occurred in 2018 and 2019 from December the 22nd to January the 25th. This is the only shutdown to occur over two separate Congresses. It began under the 115th Congress, which Republicans exclusively controlled, and lasted into the 116th Congress when Democrats took back the House thanks to the blue wave of the 2018 midterm elections. At issue was President Trump's demands for $5.7 billion to fund the border wall between the US and Mexico. The House passed a stopgap bill to fund the wall, but Democrats filibustered its passage in the Senate, shutting down the government just before Christmas. Since the wall was discretionary spending and not mandatory, the Republicans couldn't use reconciliation, which requires only 51 votes to pass the Senate, to break the filibuster. After the new Congress was sworn in, the Democratic House passed a funding bill that had passed the Senate unanimously in the previous Congress before the border wall funding demands were made. However, Trump pledged to veto any bill that didn't fund the wall, and Republican Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell then refused to hold a vote on the bill in the Senate in the next Congress, signaling his support for the president. But other Republican senators then began to undercut the base, expressing their support for the House funding bill. From January the 16th through January the 23rd, McConnell blocked 3 more House bills to reopen the government. A separate Democratic and Republican proposal both failed to pass the Senate on January the 24th. Then on January the 25th, Trump agreed to a 3-week funding bill that didn't include funding for the wall, which passed Congress by a voice vote. One day before that funding was set to run out, Congress agreed to a long-term budget that included roughly $1.35 billion in funding for the wall, and Trump signed it on February the 15th. But he then declared a national emergency in order to set aside $8 billion in funding for the wall, which began to make its way through the courts. The Supreme Court issued a decision that summer allowing construction on the wall from the national emergency to be upheld until a decision in the courts was reached. But before the courts could reach a decision, Joe Biden became president and terminated the national emergency anyway. The shutdown affected 380,000 federal employees and cost $5 billion. On the front end, it seemed like Trump lost. However, after signing the 3-week deal, but before signing the long-term deal, Trump offered Democrats legislation that would codify protection for 3 times as many Dreamers as they had been trying to protect via executive orders signed by Obama in exchange for the money to fund the border wall. Given the fact that the Supreme Court allowed him to proceed with the construction of the wall amid his national emergency declaration with over $2 billion more than what he asked for from Congress, while he didn't make any concessions on DACA, it's safe to say he actually won the deal with the benefit of hindsight, particularly since the Democrats got a trifecta at the start of Biden's presidency in 2021 and could have stopped the funding for the wall with legislation on their own at that point anyway.